Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Bonjour à la 12e édition
Welcome to
de la semaine méditerranéenne des leaders économiques MedaWeek Barcelona, qui se tient
this new edition of MedaWeek that is taking place between November 17th to 19th, starting from today, and to open up this major event where we are starting out with the 9th Summit for Renewable and Green Energy. So during both of these sessions, we will discuss renewable energy, innovation, economy, South-South cooperation, and financing. So this edition in particular, was meant to have an African dimension. So we will also discuss Mediterranean and African partnerships well beyond North Africa. And we will also discuss the different projects that we can also develop between both continents, etc. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our speakers, who all come from international institutions, from the private sector and the public sector. So we have Dr. Gramenos Mastrohini, the Deputy Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean, and Dr. Bedr Iken, who is the Director General of the Solar and Renewable Energy Institution, IRESEN, and Dr. Blanca Moreno, the Director for the Center for Mediterranean Integration, and Dr. Jawad Al-Kharraz, the Executive Director for the Regional Center for Renewable Energy, and for Ms. Belisa Feliz, the Secretary General of the Association for Solar Industry for the Middle East, and Dr. Mustafa Tomi, who's a former regional head of the MENA region of IRINA, the International Agency for Renewable Energy, and the Honorable Genaro Migliore, the chair of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. So we will directly start out with Dr. Gramenos Mastrohini, who actually needs to leave us in just a few moments. And thank you for your patience and for sharing your time with us.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends, some of whom I see speaking together with me. I will talk to you from the point of view of the only international organization that has the whole of the Mediterranean as its competence, but also under the considerations and the emotions of the COP26, in which I was and that has just finished. One thing I should tell you, we need renewables. This is objective. We need them for many reasons to tackle climate change. We need this energy as an enabler of human rights, especially looking at a deployment of off-grid renewables in the most remote communities, but you are, of course, all aware of this. What does deploying renewables in a region mean? It means, of course, a powerful way to tackle climate change, but it means interdependence. The European Union has an ambitious objective of decarbonizing totally by 2050. But in my day-to-day talks with the Commission, I can testify their awareness that this is simply impossible without the renewable potentials of the southern rim of the Mediterranean. We need to enhance this complementarity, also because there will be no development of a large renewable sector only counting on the market potential of the South. What does all this mean? It means, of course, that it is of public interest to develop renewables, but it means above all, as COP has taught us, that we cannot only count on public intervention to drive a sector towards a public utility objective. The real stake here is making renewables profitable, income generating. And this is easier said than done, because if the technology starts to be there, it is proven that some renewable sources are now more efficient and even cheaper than traditional fossil sources. To make them profit producing, they need to be connected with large enough markets. And this introduces what we consider as UFM the highest possible stake in this region, which is interconnection. We need South-South interconnection. Backup by the traditional grid, which is necessary in the transition phase, cannot be done only with the existing fragmented markets and infrastructure. North-South interconnection is necessary for the reasons that I quoted before, but also because it's the only way to create a market large enough to make these operations, which are quite costly, profitable. But then let me look at the political side of all this. If we do this for any reason, because we want energy as a form of sovereignty, because we want energy as an enabler of human rights, because we want energy to tackle climate change. But if we do this, we will gain another objective. If you think of the Mediterranean, it has been a sea of great civilizations, but it has never been a sea of peace. And this is mainly due to asymmetries that have persistently characterized the life in the Mediterranean. We are in a sea where, just to give you an image of international exchanges, 90% of them occur among North Stream states, 9% between the North and the South, and only 1% among South Stream states. So this asymmetry, which is very dangerous, and it's even more dangerous under the pressure of climate change impacts, needs to be corrected very quickly. If we do achieve interconnection based on renewable potential, what is going to happen is that a lot of these asymmetries will be automatically rebalanced. Energy is an engine of economic activity. It creates a situation in which income will be gradually redistributed in a fair way. So we're looking at something that might just look like a commodity out of a new source. But if we really go all the way, we have to go out of a Mediterranean basin of interconnected energy based on renewables potential. We will be able to build fairer economies, resilience to climate change, and above all, out of it, peace. So far, we can go just out of windmills and solar panels. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gramenos. I recall that you need to leave us in just a few moments. I also would like to recall to all of those that are following us that they can ask questions during this entire session, and that we'll try to answer to the best of our ability. So I now would like to give the floor to Dr. Iken. He is the Director General of the Solar Energy and Renewable Energy Research Institute, IRESEN, based in Morocco.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Karoum.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Karoum.
Dear friends, it's a real pleasure and honor for me to attend today and to have the opportunity to share with you how are we supporting this positive development regarding renewable energy in our region. And like Gramenos said, I totally agree. We have to have a better distribution of wealth. And I think that clean technologies, renewable energies will support us in this direction. I have to say that when we see our position, we have important renewable energy resources, maybe then more wind in the north, more sun in the south, but there is clearly a huge potential. We have an experience regarding the deployment of important renewable energy power plants, and we saw that it's proven, it works. We have the proximity, connectivity, which we have to strengthen. Definitely, we need more North-South cooperation and more South-North cooperation. And I would like then to take this opportunity to share with you how are we supporting this development, especially through applied R&D, through innovation and different facilities, which normally have the objective to build the bridges and to become a kind of innovation highways for renewable energy and clean technologies. ARISEN is focusing more in the topics which will play more and more an important role if we would like to decarbonize our economies. We speak about renewable energy, we speak about then energy efficiency, we have then water resources. We have new topics like the development of the e-mobility. E-mobility means as well the use of new resources, energy storage in a different way. And you see in the middle the topic of green molecules and green hydrogen, and I will then mention this later on. And how are we supporting the strategy? We have two instruments. One is the funding to support applied R&D projects through technological support and funding. And we have infrastructures, the bridges, which I mean. And the approach is to try to mutualize, to have practical training, to have applied research and innovation, and to use them to have more and more business creation, especially in the South. And we have a lot of call for proposals. We are trying to have bilateral call for proposals. If I take the example of INO-ESPA energy, we have the participation between Morocco and Spain. We have multilateral as well call for proposals like LIP-RA between Europe and Africa, and we have mission innovations. It's maybe then larger. We're building a network of innovation labs on the national levels. And what are the innovation highways? We're building R&D infrastructures across the country, and we have already one in Africa. And like you see, to give an example of the green energy park, you have conventional labs, but you have pilot projects, and pilot projects are very important for companies to test, to validate, to optimize solutions, and to adapt them to the specific. This R&D platform is the Green and Smart Building Park, but a topic of energy efficiency, green buildings, smart grids, as well as the e-mobility. And this is a kind of a small city in which we have different microgrids, and we're testing different solutions, not only the development of the use of natural materials, the use of new materials for the construction, but also then the smart grids. And we are now trying to strengthen and to have a larger cooperation, not only on the regional, but on the continental level. And through the Green Africa Innovation Network, we're finishing one R&D and innovation platform, Green Energy Park Morocco, Côte d'Ivoire in Yamoussoukro. And this would be then the same, to use the facilities to be able to do, like this example for solar, to do training, to work on real projects, and then to try then to use the results to develop and to have a social impact. This is the same, for example, for lighting. This is the same for smart villages projects and so on. And we're trying then to do the same for the e-mobility. This is the model which we choose to support this regional development regarding renewable energy. We have the topic of the use of clean energy in the field of agriculture. And last but not least, the last topic is green hydrogen. We believe, and this is why I would like to add to what Grameno said, renewable energy would be then important. The production of green hydrogen and derivatives will as well play an important role. And we're developing an R&D platform like the solar energy platform with different pilot projects, with the idea to cooperate. And this is an example of a regional cooperation for green hydrogen with different countries to cooperate regarding technology, but as well to cooperate regarding policy, financing, and so on. We build integrated national hydrogen and strategy. And the idea really, this is my last slide, is to try to build, and I think we have an opportunity to build a new model of energy partnership based on renewable energies as well as on green hydrogen. This is what I wanted then to share with you. And maybe then one information we have by the beginning of December, the World Power to X Summit, an important event during 3 days for the topic of green hydrogen to support this new, this topic of the day after tomorrow. But we saw, especially regarding the renewable energy, that in the last 10 years, we had then a huge decrease regarding costs, and the ideas as well then to support now this development. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur Eken, pour cette intéressante
Thank you, Mr. Eken, for this very interesting
Et
presentation.
je passe directement la parole
And
à
without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Bruno Moreno, who's the director for the Center of Mediterranean Integration.
Discussion on the threat under the threat of climate change.
Dr. Blanca, est-ce que vous pouvez voir
Dr. Blanca, could maybe check your microphone? We cannot hear you.
He was working. Can you hear me now? No?
Toujours un problème.
There still seem to be some interruptions. Could you maybe come closer to the microphone?
I will try my best. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, I will try to speak louder. Is it okay now? Thank you.
Oui, c'est un peu mieux que...
Slightly, it's slightly better than before.
I don't know what to do. Well, let us proceed. You don't hear me well. It's just another speaker can go, and then in the meantime, I try to fix it. But for now...
D'accord, en attendant que vous arrivez à régler le problème.
So yes, maybe we can give the floor to a different speaker until you sort out your sound issue. So Dr. Jawad Kharez, who's the Executive Director of the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, who will also give us a presentation of his organization's activities. So hello everyone, hello Lubna, I will try to share my presentation.
Alors, je vois si c'est full screen.
Let me see if I'm on full screen mode yet.
Once again, just to make sure you will have the full screen. Alors, c'est toujours. You see my presentation, isn't? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank ASCAME for having me, for inviting me to this very important panel. I will try in my presentation. I know that I have little time, but I will try to emphasize what we do in RECRE, and then also I will highlight some of the projects that we do in the Arab Mediterranean countries and also in some of the African countries. So RECRE, we are the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. We are legally an intergovernmental organization. We have 17 member states on board. We are considered the technical arm, official technical arm, actually, institution for the League of Arab States Energy Department, as well as of the Arab Ministerial Council for Electricity. We are leader in clean energy policy dialogue, strategies, technologies, training, capacity building, investment, and project support in the region. We were the first, actually, regional renewable energy and energy efficiency center across the world. We are based in Cairo, and we have regional antennas and a pool of short-term experts. The main work areas are basically, so we work on policy reform and supports through supporting action plans for sustainable energy. We do also support legal, regulatory, and contractual frameworks. Also at the level of knowledge management, we have an online platform we collect data from our member states. We develop some recognized indicators regionally, and also we do carry out several capacity building activities for the member states in the region. In terms of promoting the private sector, we do actually assess the market. We do promote investment of the private sector in those sectors. Also, in the area of sustainable energy projects assessment, we carry out assessments, financial and technical assessment, and also we do social and economic impact assessment studies. In the area of environment and climate change, we actually do also carry out social and economical impact assessment studies. Environmental social impact assessment studies, yes, and also we develop or we support climate change adaptation mitigation measures in the region. We developed indices, the tracking tool, etc. And finally, also we have done some efforts in the level of standardization and certification. So we have some product certification and personal certification at level of training. And we have a portfolio, diversified portfolio, more than 40 projects with various partners and stakeholders in the region. In terms of promoting private sector investments, just to give you an example of what we do in this area. So, for example, in Egypt, we developed the sorts of guidelines for the Egyptian solar PV feed-in tariff procedures for large-scale projects, but also for a small-scale projects. At the level of research and analysis and knowledge management, so we actually have a very known regional indicator called Arab Future Energy Index. We publish these indicators every year. We have two kind of indicators, one on energy efficiency and one on renewable energies. They are based on energy pricing, on the policy framework, on the institutional capacity or governance, and also on utility and the level of renewable energy. We also consider the market structure and finance and investment climates. This is just to give you an overview of the kind of partners we work with. So we have diversified kind of partners, international financial institutions, private sector, international and regional organization, etc. So just to give you an overview on the market realities, in particular in the Arab region, in terms of renewable energies. So as you know, renewable energies in the Arab region is becoming mainstream, in particular in the power sector. In terms of investments, over the past decade, in particular solar and wind, were exceeding $17 billion. Obviously, there is a clear commitment, engagement to embrace strong forward-thinking policies and capture the immense value of the renewables business and cross-border interconnections. Many policies or supporting the renewables and financial instruments have proven to be effective and considered success stories in the region, in particular what is related to competitive bids and auctions for utility scale projects, which resulted in competitive renewable energy electricity prices. Obviously, such prices were possible because of the excellent solar and wind energy resources, backed by some concessional financial coupled with policy measures or mechanisms to reduce the various risks and encourage investment, PPPs and others. Some figures on renewable energy in the Arab region. We are now talking about a total of almost 23 gigawatt in the region, split between wind, PV, CSP, and others. This is just to show you the renewable technologies adoption in the Arab region in the last decade. So we can see that obviously wind and PV technologies are dominating the renewable market in the Arab region. In terms of the total renewable energy capacity per capita share, so we have some champions in the region, like Jordan, Morocco, UAE, etc. We are talking about announced targets by 2035 of more than 190 gigawatt, and the business of renewables % of the global solar and wind growth, which is really important. The target of renewable energy in the Arab region, so we have very ambitious targets in several Arab countries. If we can highlight, for example, in Morocco, we are having 52% as target by 2030, which means like 10 gigawatt. We are having 42% by 2035 in Egypt, and we are having 100% by 2030 in Djibouti, etc. As I said before, so we do support action plans, and in this case, national renewable energy action plans, which translate target into policies and implementation mechanism. So we consider renewable energy indicators, we consider policies and mechanisms, we consider also the progress assessment of such action plans. I won't go into details. Already my friend Badrikin mentioned the green hydrogen potential. Is obviously in some countries of the region, we are having the challenge of surplus of renewable energy and conventional generation. So there are now a movement towards a green hydrogen project and P2X in many countries in the region. In Africa, for example, Morocco, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, we are starting developing national strategies in this area. Obviously, the green hydrogen traction will offer long-term opportunities to the Arab countries to integrate higher shares of renewables into the grid and the possibility of exportation to third countries worldwide and decarbonize different sectors. In terms of sustainable energy finance and investment, some countries like Egypt, Morocco, Algeria are leading the Arab renewable energy competitive markets. The region has worldwide flagship solar and wind projects. So as I said before, with very, very competitive electricity prices, around 70% of Arab countries have public financing channels for sustainable energy project. Many international funding institutions are very active in the region, World Bank, IFD, JICA, etc. And at least for countries created state-backed private sector companies to invest in renewables. We can give the example of Morocco, Algeria, and lately Libya. Key messages I will finalize with this slide. So RICRI, we supported many Arab African countries in developing their national energy efficiency and renewable energy action plans, in particular Egypt, Sudan, Djibouti, Somalia, and recently Libya. Each country has its own context and specificities, as you know, which entail considering innovation on the policy options and regulatory framework to be adopted. Obviously, we cannot have one size fits all approach, and we need to innovate also in the ecosystem for a conducive business environment. There is a clear need to build the capacity of officials and state actors on different technical, financial, social, economical, and environmental issues. RICRI, we collaborated with the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative, in particular in capacity development over the last 3 years, building on the deep North African country experiences in setting sustainable energy policies, as well as what is related to regulatory, legal, and contractual frameworks for private investment. And finally, we signed an MOU with the Rest for Africa Foundation, and will soon announce a training on microgrids, which we see as of high importance for the development of the power systems in Africa. Thank you very much for your attention. Your mic is off, Lubna.
Dr. Moreno-Dodson.
Dr. Moreno-Dodson, can we maybe try to give you the floor? Is your microphone all set? We still can't hear you. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we still cannot hear you. So we will give the floor to the next speaker until Dr. Moreno-Dodson's microphone is fixed. So Ms. Benissa, I hope that I pronounced your name correctly. So you're the Secretary General of the Association for Solar Industry for the Middle East, MESIA. You have the floor.
Thank you, Lubna. Happy to be here. I'm going to make a short intro in Spanish just to show you that I speak Spanish. Buenos días a todos.
Hablo español. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in the MedaWeek Barcelona. I would have loved to be in Barcelona in presence with you. I'm currently based in Dubai, but here we are, and as a representative of MESIA, which is the Middle East Solar Industry Association, I usually talk about the space of the south of the Mediterranean Sea, which is Morocco, North Africa. And now I switch to English because my Spanish is slightly rusty.
So when we speak about the Mediterranean region, at the Middle East Solar Industry Association, we're focused on member companies in the North Africa side and the developments happening there. And I think the situation is definitely a bit different in the European space. The regulations are still needing work. We still can't really talk about net metering, about tax credits, about subsidies in all the countries. And the methods to store energy are still unaffordable for these markets. I think being positioned as they are around the Saharan desert and having this special position, these countries benefit from this natural gift that is the Sahara Desert, and it makes it an ideal place for solar projects. So I read this news recently that the research imagined that it might be possible to transform the world's largest desert, which is the Sahara, into a giant solar farm, and it would be capable of meeting 4 times the world's current energy demand. So I think that's very ambitious. There are a lot of challenges with both wind and solar energy in these markets, but there are also great business opportunities. There's a huge opportunity for European countries to import renewable energy from the North Africa space and lower their tariffs. I'm just going to talk a little bit about a few of the countries that stood out this year. Morocco. So 52% of the installed capacity by renewables by 2030, that's their goal. The objectives are to have 20% solar, 20% wind, and 12% hydro. The country currently imports over 90% of its energy from outside, but aims to reduce that to lower than 20% by 2050. The regulations regarding wind energy are in place, but for only high voltage applications, which only account for about 5% of the market. So there has to be an amendment to this law to allow the development of solar and wind capacity for medium voltage clients. Net metering is still not integrated in the country, and creating an IPP structure is not supported by current regulations. I read recently that plans are being drawn up to lay 3,800 kilometer power cables to bring up to 3.6 gigawatts of renewable energy to the UK. And the power will be from both wind and solar farms. This would mean about 5 gigs of battery energy storage. This project will generate for about 20 plus hours a day. This will result in a new constant source of flexible and predictable renewable energy. It will also create jobs if we consider locally manufactured solar and wind components, but also I think in terms of local civil engineering works. So although thousands of these jobs for construction will be temporary, a few thousand will also become permanent. The authorities have to focus on attracting foreign investment and securing funding from international authorizations as well, having foreign developed contractors on products and solutions, and utilize the local workforce. I would say that 99% of the country is electrified. So for solar energy to really make sense, the tariffs should be lower than the grid tariffs. So ultimately, the aim is to provide decentralized power solutions. I'm going to go to Libya as well. Did some research on our members from there. So,
Denisa, s'il vous plaît, on m'informe qu'il nous reste 15 minutes maximum.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Si vous pouvez être plus bref pour qu'on puisse donner.
No problem. I'm almost done.
So if we could be brief so we can give the floor to the next speaker, excuse me.
Come to Egypt, they're the current superpower of North Africa. They implemented environmentally friendly projects that qualified them to host the COP27 next year. So all eyes are definitely on Egypt. They currently installed about 32 solar plants. To sum up, the prime resources are there, but the infrastructure has to be built or improved, or at least to help distribute the renewable energy. And the goals can be achieved by attracting investors, attract developers, and the regulations to improve, and creating jobs and really leverage the climatic resources of the sub-Mediterranean space. Thank you.
Merci à vous, Denisia.
Thank you very much, Denisia.
Sans aussi trop tarder, je passe
So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Mustafa Taouni
pour sa présentation, et je vous prie
to
d'être
give us this presentation. And I'd like to ask you to be brief because given that we started late, we are in a hurry. We are rushed to avoid being late for the next session. Thank you very much, Lubna, for your introduction, and hello, everyone. Of course, we give a lot more time to the first speakers and the last ones. End up being a little shorted. No, rest assured, we'll. So just for, I mean, I'm not sure if we'll have time to for the Q&A session. That was the point I was trying to make. It wasn't regarding the presentations. But if you allow me, I maybe can shorten my presentation and maybe shed light on a few aspects regarding renewable energy, a lot more on clean energy in the Mediterranean. Obviously, we know that the optimal objective is to decarbonize all sectors by 2050. There are some countries that have already announced, but very few countries have announced this decarbonization by 2050. However, there still is a lot of there still is a lot to be done. There's still a lot of room for improvement. We can't say that the landscape is perfect. We are on the right path. Now, what we need to put all hands on deck, and especially with renewable energy. I mean, personally, as an expert that has been studying this field for quite a few years in the region, it's important to diversify, and we cannot only target renewable energy. There's also energy efficiency. Because with the calculations that we've done at IRENA and the different scenarios that we have developed with the European Union for the Gulf countries, with the increase with the consumption of increase of consumption of demand, I mean, it varies between 5 to 8%. For the low-income countries, it's a little less. And now with the targets that have been announced, we cannot meet these objectives because this 5 to 8% increase per year is not enough to allow us to meet these targets, and it isn't enough to double the contribution of renewable energy. And so the solutions that we have is to activate energy efficiency. And so I guess this is the weakness of a lot of programs, a lot of energy programs in Arab countries or in MENA countries, and energy efficiency, unfortunately, is the poor parent. And so we cannot meet the objectives set by the Paris Agreement if we rely on renewable energy alone. And we need to introduce, as it's been announced by Dr. Badr, Dr. Jawad, and the rest, we also need to introduce hydrogen, especially for the sectors, because we are also focusing on the energy sector, whereas we have other sectors such as industry, transport, that are not targeted by these targets by renewable energy. However, renewable energy, technically speaking, has a very hard time penetrating these sectors, which are very difficult to decarbonize. And this is where hydrogen can contribute to decarbonizing these sectors. And we also need to try to see which are the objectives at the regional level, and this is also where the Mediterranean can play a leading role worldwide, because obviously all of the ingredients are there, but there's a lot of political talk, but very few of which would translate into concrete actions on the ground. And so where are the instruments? to implement all of these projects, these ambitious projects that have been announced for the past few decades. There's also the connection between the north and the south. I mean, there's only Spain and Morocco, but there still is a lot of room for improvement in the eastern region as well, and in the central as well. So south-south connections, but also north-south connections. And this could indeed lead to the creation of a power market, a hydrogen market. I mean, all of this infrastructure needs to have the right means and resources. I mean, it's not institutions such as the Union for the Mediterranean that have this capability to finance these projects. So on the funding side, it's important to have institutions that are truly capable of financing these major infrastructure. There's also training. There's a lot that still remains to be done, and unfortunately I see that our universities are still lagging behind with the ancient concepts of conventional energy that are still taught to our students. And this is not the solution. We also need to update the curriculums. We also need to change the concepts. And here, for example, the role of ERESEN is important. It's important to train people. People need to be trained on the ground. I mean, it's not only through theoretical training, also not to mention incentives for research and innovation. So this is what I wanted to share with you all today. Thank you for your kind attention.
Merci à vous, Dr. Termi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Termi.
Dr. Blanca, le problème est
Dr.
réglé.
Blanca, have you been able to fix your microphone?
I have disconnected the computer and connected with the phone, so I hope it's working out now. Thank you very much, ASCAME, for inviting me to this very important discussion. The advantage of coming last is that I don't need to repeat what others already presented. I'm trying to rather react to what they say, which I very much enjoy, and focus on a few points. First of all, that I think, as many of the speakers eloquently said, it's in the interest of both the north and the south of the Mediterranean to really foster this Euro-Mediterranean integration of the energy market. We know that with the recovery from COVID and the population growth, Europeans cannot meet their decarbonization goals without the south and the east of the Mediterranean. We also know that energy can act as one of the sectors to improve growth rates in the south and in the east, and there is a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of opportunities that could emerge if this integration takes place. But as some of the speakers already identify, this is not so easy. There are a lot of obstacles that remain still. First of all, if we want the countries from the south to really develop their potential for production, there are some blockages that need to be removed. First of all, the subsidies to fossil fuels. They have to be eliminated. Otherwise, the incentives for the renewable energies, even though the prices now have lowered quite a lot, particularly for solar energy, they will not be there. So we must get away with all the fossil fuel subsidies. Second, we have a long way to go in terms of regulations. Regulations are not harmonized between southern Mediterranean countries, and let alone harmonization with the European Union. There is a lot of work to do to look at what the EU is doing and see how southern and eastern Mediterranean countries could adapt their own regulations to trigger this integration with the north. We still, as the previous speaker said, we are still very limited in terms of infrastructure for connectivity. Yes, the projects are promising, but the money is not there yet. So we need to focus on building this infrastructure. And then we also have to harmonize not only regulations, but also some conditions to access the market of interconnectors. On the bright side, we know that the European Green Deal offers a great opportunity for the South. And we know that the EU's Recovery and Resilience Facility, and I'm actually this week here in Brussels discussing with them all these issues, offers a great opportunity. There is a new Mediterranean policy framework that offers technical and financial cooperation instruments. And we, the Center for Mediterranean Integration, would like to work with them, and of course the UFM and all the other actors, to see how this framework will be implemented in the South. It would be so beneficial for Morocco, for example. The investments in green hydrogen have been mentioned. For Algeria to diversify the economy, to Egypt to pursue their current efforts of energy research. There are many, many opportunities for countries in the South if we act all together. So just to summarize and to end, I think that we, all of us working on these topics, we need to continue collaborating. That's why events like MedaWeek are very, very important, because we're going to need everybody's contribution. We're going to need, first of all, solid public sector strategies from the governments in the South. We're going to need new and more innovative financing instruments. I was very happy to hear that some of them are already emerging. That's fantastic. Leapfrogging and technology transfer will be essential, because not every country is going to be able to invest in R&D. So if the technologies already exist in the North, why not promote leapfrogging and technology transfer? And for all this, we're going to need, of course, the private sector involvement in partnership with the public sector, but also skills building. We are going to have to recycle some of the workers that were working in fossil fuel sectors, and that is going to take some skills building. And we want to provide the youth and the future of the labor force with the skills that they need to work in this market of renewable energy. So I hope I haven't been too long. I remain available for any questions that the audience may have. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and apologies for the sound problems.
Merci, merci à vous, Dr.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blanca. I would like to give the floor to the Honorable Genaro Miguri, who is our last speaker.
Thanks, dear colleagues and friends. Let me start by thanking the organizer for the invitation of this key event, and extended in behalf of the Parliamentary Assembly of Mediterranean, that, as you know, I am the president of PAM, and we represent 34 parliaments in all Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf regions. PAM has a prominent interest in the subject we are discussing, and I listen all the contributes that we had in this morning. And since its establishment, PAM has devoted several events on green and renewable energies related issues, including a strategic interaction among our members and formulation of policy papers. And we have a lot of proposals for the future. For instance, we are familiar, of course, with the Agenda 2030 established by General Assembly of the United Nations. In particular, the United Nations has clearly identified in Sustainable Development Goal number 7 the need to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. One of the targets of the 7th goal is to promote investment in energy infrastructure and clean energy technologies, as we listened in the previous intervention. There is a sort of general perception that addressing the goals of Agenda 2030 is just a mere academic exercise. In this respect, let me draw your attention to what I saw in Glasgow. I was recently there to attend the high-level segment of the COP26. This gave me the chance to hear factual findings on the current and future situation of climate change in our planet. The last published report on nationally determined contribution showed that we are condemning the world to a calamitous 2.7 degrees increase. As the UN Secretary General said in Glasgow, we face a stark choice. Either we stop it or it stop us, of course. I think there is a sentence summarized dramatically that we need to act and now. The science is clear. We know the target of 1.5 degrees. It is imperative for our region to create the financial and technological condition to accelerate the decarbonization of the economy, as well as the phase out of coal. In this respect, promoting greener renewable energies is not just a goal, it's a must to ensure a dignified life to ourselves and for our future. At present, despite the progress made, renewable energy remain marginal in the energy mix of the Euro-Mediterranean region. Believe that a number of elements are responsible for this condition. The extensive ongoing use of subsidies on non-renewable energy sources, as we mentioned before, the lack of policy coordination among Euro-Mediterranean energy governing bodies, the fragility of energy infrastructure and electricity grids in some Mediterranean countries. However, the exploitation of green technology represents an invaluable opportunity for our region. By phasing out from fossil fuels, especially coal, Mediterranean countries have the potential to meet rising domestic energy, electricity demand at lower cost, reduce the energy bills in energy importing countries, help to the restructuring of those economies heavily reliant in the export of fossil fuels. Diversity energy-related risk. In the next future, while oil is expected to remain the main fuel in Mediterranean energy mix at least until 2040, renewable energies will overtake natural gas and coal in production of electricity in our region. EU estimates predict that in 2040, the share of renewable energies will reach up to 24% of total power generation. According to recent projection among renewable technology, solar and wind will grow in the fastest pace in the Euro-Mediterranean region. For this reason, a few weeks ago at the BioExpo Summit on Green Energy and using as model the European Community of Steel and Coal, as PEM President, we launched the proposal to establish the Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf Community of Renewable Energy, MeCore. The aim is that of creating a structured framework of cooperation with all stakeholders, including international financial institutions and private sector. MeCore will provide a space dedicated to helping energy actors and institutions to create and implement new initiatives. This will be achieved by advocating for a policy landscape and provide coordinate and interconnected legislative opportunities for energy actors to work together, learn, share business model, and help each other to overcome obstacles. And I invite all speakers today and their respective organizations to join our initiative. 10 years ago, in April 2012 in Ankara, we launched a new proposal for renewable energy. Up to now, we want to share the proposal of political and not only economical collaboration to reach peace and to have the possibility to overcome the dependence of non-renewable energy. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Renaro. Before we close this first panel, I do have a question for you. You will have a minute to answer. You all talked about creating a network to a future collaboration between North, South, South, North, in order to face, at the end of the day, all the new infrastructures that are needed. How can we be more specific? How can we create these networks and how can we boost this collaboration South-South? I'd like to give the floor to Genaro. Please, you have the floor.
As I mentioned before, we are facing the political difficulties that we have to overcome with, I'm sorry, Okay, that we have to overcome with this kind of cooperation. For that, I'm sure that the collaboration between North and South, it's not only a target that we can reach in multilateral, in a bilateral way, but especially in a multilateral approach. For that, our Parliamentary Assembly is a good network to connect all parliamentarians, because as you know, we need not only economic partnership, but also legislative frameworks and infrastructure that can be able to favorize this kind of opportunity. For that, I'm sure, and really I'm sure, that the common interest for renewable energy, it's first of all a political goal. Thanks.
Merci à vous, honorable Genaro.
Thank you very much, dear Genaro. Dr. Blanca, how can you see these connections? How can we create these networks?
The session today illustrates how many actors are already connected and in the best sense of the term, and networking among themselves to contribute solutions to this Euro market of energy, and Euro-Mediterranean market of energy. And I believe that these dialogues are productive, but I think we need more than that. And I would say that we need to use the existing structures, the platform that creates the UFM. Of course, it's very valuable, and we are all coordinating with them. At the same time, I think that further efforts are needed, not only for the dialogue, but also to trigger the investments that are very much needed to incubate those investments, because networking alone will not do it. I think we need collaboration for harmonizing regulations, etc., but we also need new investments. So I believe that working with the different organizations, the League of Arab States, all the organizations present today, each one has a very specific role to play, and the Center for Mediterranean Integration remains available to gather multilaterals and civil society and governments around the table to continue fostering this dialogue, which is very much needed and urgent if we want to arrive to the objectives of the 2050. Thank you.
Merci à vous, Dr. Blanca. Et puisque vous parlez des pays
Thank
arabes,
you. As you're speaking about Arab countries, I'd like to ask Dr. Tami. He is an expert the cooperation the Gulf states. Yes, you're right, Lubna. Thank you for being so precise. Yes, I'm coordinating several projects with the European Union. We talk about the European project aiming at taking into account the Gulf countries and to satisfy all the European projects. It is a project that will facilitate the creation of different stakeholders and the coordination amongst both regions. In order to answer to your question, when we deal with infrastructures, I do agree with the previous speakers. When we talk about infrastructures, we need political will. This is what we need to do. We need on the both sides, whether from northern bank and the south bank. When we talk about the southern side of the Mediterranean, for sure we have to make many things in order to boost the creation of networks, because networks are not as robust as we would like. So we need to strengthen that, and we need to be together with all the countries. There are some countries that are suffering difficulties and obstacles, insecurity, wars, conflicts, reconnections, physically are not ready enough to make electricity to circulate. So we need this kind of policies together with the Arab League, and I think that they will make their best. And secondly, when we deal with infrastructures, there are many questions from the investor side. Where is the market? Is there any market to develop these infrastructures? Well, we cannot forget and make quickly these infrastructures. We need to be very precise. We need to be very strict. We need to previously an electricity market. We need that. Therefore, in order to have this kind of market, it is also necessary to develop a series of instruments as well as the legislation and regulation as it was previously mentioned, and to equally have the same level of policy. Otherwise, we will never reach an equality level. We will always suffer difficulties because the countries, they do not have the same economic level. So we need to be all in line, such as it happened in France, in Germany, and to get the same level of policies. But we need a minimum level of conditions in order to have this market. So these are the ideas that we need to implement to overcome these barriers. We do have Lisa Fennis, Secretary General of the solar industry in Middle East. How do you see these connections? How can we implement the actions?
Sorry, Lubna, can you speak? Can you say it in English?
Sorry?
Can you say it in English, the question?
Okay, so who you see this connection with the
¿Cómo ves desde su perspectiva la cooperación entre los países del norte y del sur?
How do you see the perspective between North and South?
I've seen a lot of European developers going to North Africa. I've seen them do market studies, get acquainted with the regulators. I can see consultants going in there and really trying to bring the regulations up to standard. I see international contractors, APCs, going those markets, using local subcontracting force, educating the technicians there, the engineers, and making them aware of what solutions are out there, what products are launched, what technology is being implemented. Yeah, and mostly investment, foreign investment, and regulations. That's the way to move forward. And somebody to actually hold them responsible for the implementation.
Merci à vous.
Thank you very much. Dr. Harris, you are the last contributor. Please, how do you see, how do you approach, how can we create these networks? Thank you very much, Lubna. I'm going to speak in English.
Actually, my point of view, I mean, the efforts of cooperation or support in African countries, I mean, probably should focus on one of the 5 areas. So either, I mean, infrastructure investments. We know that there is an effort to do there. I mean, we need new funding, both from public and private sector, at level of institutions. So there is also need to. I know that there is progress on pushing green growth in Africa, but obviously that's happened thanks to strong political will and leadership. So this is needed. We need incentives. So many countries have plans, but few have been really translated into policies with clear incentives and penalties. Innovation. So as mentioned earlier in the intervention. So we have unfortunately limited funding. Infrastructure and human technical capacity is currently hindering innovation. So this is crucial actually. And inclusiveness, this is important, I think. So there is currently a large gap between rich and poor in Africa. So green growth emphasize equity and social inclusion. So we need really to be inclusive in those efforts. I think some of the initiatives already mentioned, for example, the Green Africa Innovation Network mentioned by Mr. Badr Ikin. I think this is an excellent initiative. Also, I can mention the Virtual Learning University, launched recently by Professor Ahmed Nawi, who is the president of the Scientific Committee of Edison, which actually gathers experts around the region to deliver a sort of a very actually to the point training on different aspects of energy transition, green technologies, and water energy nexus desalination. I think this kind of a new material of training is needed in the region. And finally, also I can mention the Green Stimulus Program for Africa. So I think this is also another initiative that could be encouraged. And finally, obviously, all the actors that took the floor today, we have a lot of synergies and cooperation to explore. And from my side, from Mercury side, we are open to any cooperation in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hassais, Dr. Eken, and Dr. Ramanus. They had to leave. They had other duties. I'd like to thank you all. Thank you so much for your kind of patience and for being amongst us. Thank you very much to those helping us with this Zoom call. All the technicians, thank you very much for this kind intervention. What an important topic, right? At the end of the day, I think that we were able to get involved, to offer our perspective, to offer new solutions, as well as several ideas in order to develop together this sector of the renewable energy at the Mediterranean and African level. Thank you so much. I hope to see you soon all again. Thank you, Lubna. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
See you.
Merci beaucoup. Très bientôt.
Je vous donne rendez-vous pour la deuxième session avec d'autres intervenants pour poursuivre.
Well, we have a second panel to continue with our discussion. Thank you so much.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello again.
Merci d'être là pour cette
Thank you
deuxième
very
session
much for
de la
joining
9e
us for this second
édition
session of the 9th edition of
méditerranéen
the
des
Mediterranean
énergies
Summit
renouvelables et
for
vertes,
Green and
organisé
Renewable
par
Energy,
l'Association des
organized
chambres de
by the
commerce de la
Association
Méditerranée,
of the
ASCAME,
Chambers of Commerce,
en marge
ASCAME,
de
on the
la 15e
sidelines of the
édition de la
15th
Semaine
edition
méditerranéenne
of
des leaders économiques,
the Mediterranean Week of Mediterranean Leaders Week, MedaWeek, which is starting today and running through November 19th. Thank you very much for being here with us. And today we will continue this discussion on renewable energy, green economy, and the possibilities for development and potential in the Mediterranean, but also in Africa, and how we can develop this connection and how we can conduct concrete actions to develop this sector, which is no longer an energy and environment and climate issue, but goes well beyond that, in fact. And renewable energy today is an important factor for economic, industrial, social development of all, for economic, social, industrial development of all countries. And today we have a distinguished set of panelists with us, just as interesting as the first panel, from different horizons, from the associations, well, from private companies and semi-public organizations, to continue to further enrich this debate on this particular theme. So today with us we have Dr. Nabil Sharadi. Dr. Nabil Sharadi, who is in fact the Associate Director of Technology. We have Mr. Hadi Zarwali, who is the Director of Cooperation and International Development of Mazen. We have Ms. Hajar Khamshi, who is the Chair and Co-founder of the network of Young Youth for the Climate, Mr. Hubballah, who's the Executive Director of Save Entrepreneurship, and we also have Professor Director Mr. Yibin, who is the CEO of Conjoncta GmbH, and we have Rami Ashmawi, who's a specialist in energy and who's a specialist of energy and sustainability of Arab Petroleum Investment Corporation, APICOR. Thank you very much to all of you for being here and for accepting the invitation of ASCAME and to continue this discussion on this important and interesting theme. So without further ado, and to leave enough time for the Q&A session, without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Nabil Sharadi. Dr. Nabil. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lubna. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me and a great honor to take part for the very first time in this event. And without further ado, I would like to tackle a point. I mean, I'm not sure how it will be addressed in this session, but it is so important that you have raised among the different points that you have raised in your introduction, Lubna, that in addition to the environmental and climate aspects, there are these socio-economic aspects as well. And I would like to focus on the issue of the development of renewable energy in general and solar, because this is the sector that I'm from. So the demand and markets, I mean, well, and there's the demand and supply aspects of this sector. And when we take a look at this, we see an equation that has, I mean, that is simple, but that has different variables and that has different parameters that are very difficult to control. And what we've experienced recently over the past 2 years, it so happens that this has been shown, even though this is something that we all knew, that the supply for anything it's important to control it, and it's important to have. There's no way that we can have sustainable development unless we control our supply. Unfortunately, supply in terms of solar panels, which were at the beginning of the solar era, so in the 2000s, were mainly located in the Mediterranean region between France and Spain, and so and also Germany, and there's also the US and beyond, but we were talking about the Mediterranean region here. Well, suddenly transformed, and there wasn't a relocation of these industries elsewhere. So there is simply an extinction of this industry. And today, we are faced with the fact that this supply is concentrated in one region of the world. I mean, is it reasonable to continue along this path? I don't think so, in my humble opinion, that we need to continue to live with this. I mean, especially if we transfer this issue to the point that you raised, Lubna, with the socioeconomic aspects. If we take a look at the way in which the supply of solar panels, how the supply of this, if we take a look at the supply of solar panels or wind farms, and well, we will be creating an industry. This industry will create jobs that don't exist and that couldn't have existed if this industry didn't exist. So it's not a trend or a movement from one industry to the next. I mean, these are very specific jobs. And we will also develop a technology that will necessarily call on research institutions, on universities. So we will be creating an entire ecosystem around this. And for the time being, and again, on my humble advice, is very much lacking in the Mediterranean region. There are also a few initiatives that have developed here and there in the Mediterranean region. Let's say, for example, the case of Morocco, where we saw the certain industries that did not have an opportunity to express themselves and to develop, and they were practically extinct. And for those that still remain are struggling, or are, as I mentioned, are really struggling to develop because we lack this vision of industrialization that goes beyond the simple development of renewable energy. So I really would like to focus on this particular point and see how we can harness this opportunity that we have of turning to renewable energy, which is virtually no longer an option, but it is mandatory for humanity. I mean, we cannot continue along these lines. If we take a look at our demands in electricity, I mean, it only continues to increase. Even if we continue to believe in other forms of energy aside from nuclear, I mean, there are some countries that are starting to talk about it, while others are considering their exit from nuclear energy. And how will we be able to face this massive demand of energy transfer and this shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy? And I also would like to focus diplomatically speaking, if you will allow me, on the development of these industries that cannot happen without a direct assistance from governments. And the reason why, for example, governments support and develop nuclear energy while they don't do the same for renewable energies. And I would like to conclude on this note, and I am open to your questions and comments. Thank you very much, Dr. Shiradi, for your intervention. You discussed wealth creation, wealth creation, job creation, which leads me to Mr. Hadi Sarwadi, who I'm sure will discuss Mazen and what they are doing along these lines. You have the floor, Mr. Hadi Sarwadi. Thank you very much, Mrs. Karoun. I also would like to thank the organizers for the great quality of this event. It's the second time that I participate and the first time that I'm participating virtually. And it was always a pleasure to meet all of you, but even if it's virtually now, it's nice enough until we can meet each other in person again. And I also would like to thank Mr. Shiradi for sharing his insights regarding this opportunity of industrial, economic, and social development, which is related to this dynamic of renewable energies. And this is maybe the starting point that maybe led Morocco under the vision and the impetus of His Majesty the King since 2009 to launch this dynamic of renewable energies at a large scale. And obviously, to reduce the energy dependence of Morocco for all of the external imports, but also to create a new driver and a new economic and industrial arena. And it's important to note that Morocco, and back then there was a real dynamic. I mean, it was interesting to see the relationship between fossil fuels and renewable energy. We were in fact this was going against climate change, global warming, and was going against the economic and going against the industrial development. So there was a challenge. And so today we have more than 4 gigawatts in this energy mix that exceeds 10 gigawatts and that are of a renewable origin. And so the wind program, which has 50 megawatts, which is with the largest wind farms in the world. And in Ouarzazate, we have as I mentioned, the largest wind farm worldwide. And so this shows us all of the progress that's been made and Morocco's commitment to take the leap and join in on this revolutionary dynamic that it initiated and to which it has also participated, but aware that this dynamic of industrial and economic development cannot limit itself to a national ambition. I mean, for this dynamic to reveal itself and to leap forward, it needs to be part of a regional or continental momentum. And it is thanks to this understanding that Morocco engaged in bilateral cooperation, particularly turned to Africa, with more than 20 bilateral agreements in Africa, with the idea of spurring and stimulating this global dynamic that will create a much broader market and allow this industry to develop. Because regardless of if Morocco were to develop to limit itself to 4 gigawatts, it doesn't allow it to reach the critical level to locate it, to be able to push forward. It's important to note that countries such as Spain or France or others have capacities that widely surpass the 4 gigawatts. So when we talk about 4 gigawatts in Morocco, it's quite limited. So we needed to spur this global dynamic. We also committed to about 20 bilateral cooperation agreements, which focused on capacity building, sharing of know-how, but also technical assistance. So for example, with Rwanda, on the largest project in Rwanda for the power production, power generation using hydraulic resources, which we helped to secure the technical design and structure the sales negotiations and the development of the project. And these forms of cooperation also have a co-development nature. And for instance, I can mention Djibouti, where we have developed a 450 megawatt project, and so there's also a solar project for the 100 megawatts, and which is at the final phase. And this is all part of the umbrella of South-South cooperation, the concept of sharing know-how or skills transfer, or to multiply efforts to accelerate this dynamic is at the heart of this bilateral cooperation momentum that's initiated by Morocco. Also aware that renewable energy suffers from intermittence, and the more we broaden the spectrum of the grid with the strengthening of these power exchanges between countries, well, the more we reduce this this penalty relating to the intermittence of renewable energies. And so the more we store in other people's grids because of these power exchanges. And this is why Morocco, since 2016, during COP22 in Marrakesh, committed to a dynamic called the Sustainable Electricity Trade Roadmap, which integrates 4 European pillars, which are France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, funded with the support of the European Commission and the support of the World Bank that has funded these studies that have showed certain benefits to increase these power exchanges between different countries. And in this way, the negotiations that led to the finalization of an agreement between the 5 countries, which should be signed in the coming weeks, and which will pave the way and which will lay the regulatory framework for the integration of power markets. And so the first market is the first one will be launched initially. It will start out the first one will mean that for example a developer in Morocco can sell power to an off-taker in France, and for example a producer in Spain can sell electricity to a high voltage off-taker in Morocco. And so this creates many opportunities between the different economic players around this, and so hence increase the power capabilities from renewable sources, which necessarily has positive socioeconomic repercussions. Now, along this dynamic needs to be materialized. I mean, it's important to leverage what's been done over the past decade between 2010, 2020, and to turn towards 2030 objectives that are even more significant. In Morocco, we're already talking about a 52% objective by 2030, and this objective could be met a lot sooner given the projects that are in the pipeline, and that could even be increased because we're talking about a minimum of 52% by 2030, and we even are considering to reach figures that are even higher, much higher than the 52%. It's also important to harness the applications related to renewable energy, because this is what will go beyond the emergence of a green market, but this will lead to the creation of a decarbonated industry that use renewable energies as commodities to have greater competitiveness, to avoid carbon taxes that could be enter into force since 2023, and enhance the competitiveness of this industrial fabric that could be located in the southern region of the Mediterranean. And so it's this entire dynamic that is inclusive, that is collaborative, that Morocco is part of, to make renewable energy a real driver of industrialization for the benefit of the population with major socioeconomic repercussions. And so hydrogen is part of these applications that will allow us to value renewable energy and to help these decarbonated industries that will establish themselves in Morocco or in the Mediterranean region. So it's this whole inclusive dynamic that is a part of a win-win dynamic, south-south, but also south-north, that we call the Zen model, for the benefit of a sustainable economic model that should be part of a win-win dynamic on all of the involving the entire Mediterranean region. Thank you very much, Mr. Zerwadi, for your contribution, which focused on this regional and continental and inclusive dimension, and focused on a win-win basis and including a south-south and also including a south-south dimension. So later on, we'll also discuss how we can develop the industry in Africa through green economy. And so please allow me to directly give the floor to Ms. Hajar Khandishi, who is the chair of the Mediterranean Network for the climate, or the youth network for the youth network for climate youth. Excuse me, youth Youth Mediterranean Network for the climate. And so indeed, the countries in the Mediterranean region are at different levels of socioeconomic development with major variations in the natural resources and are faced with different challenges from the political and social standpoints. However, their futures are faced with challenges because they are faced with a situation that should lead to major threats for their well-being in the coming decades. And fossil fuels have been the major source of energy in all countries. And as such, the energy needs, domestic energy needs, continue to increase, as the colleagues have already mentioned, in many countries in the region, which poses major socioeconomic and environmental challenges. And in fact, most of the countries in the region tend to want to increase the use of renewable energies. They have set objectives that, if they were to be implemented, could lead to a rapid increase of the use of renewable energy in their energy mix, especially as far as power goes. If we were to see the share of renewable energy, so there's also flexibility measures that involve the storage, green hydrogen, or electric cars, could all facilitate and help this integration. Also, the strengthening of transport systems and involving the regional level, that also include the regional level, should help us to reach these objectives. And so I'm delighted to hear what Mr. Zerwali has said, that there is an impact with 5 countries that have started working together, but it's important to have a scale that involves a lot more states in a lot more states. So this should also lead to the development of these energy mix while allowing economic development, while the development of policies at the national level is absolutely necessary to ensure this transition. And so the importance of regional cooperation cannot be underestimated. And so the coordination actions such as sharing and co-development of infrastructures of energy networks and the facilitation of the technical exchanges and the capacity building activities, as well as the integrated regional efforts, could also lead to decarbonation. So the Europeans model, even if it isn't completely transferable to the region, could be a good example of a consistent method of transformation. And so by the end of 2020, more than 12 countries of the European Union had adopted or proposed laws around zero emissions or the net zero by 2050, and had in fact allocated major financial resources focused on renewable energy. In order for these objectives to be met, they need to be translated in long-term plans and have solutions that are based on renewable energies and measures to improve energy efficiency and to develop the necessary infrastructures. This is absolutely important to avoid any measures that could hinder this progress, such as the gas pipelines. And so energy transition does also require the standardization of rules for the use of fossil fuels, and to eliminate stop spending these millions of dollars that are spent on fossil fuels. As much as possible, decision makers also need to consider implementing fiscal policies such as carbon taxes to try to push these measures forward. It's important to examine social and equity issues, in particular for low-income populations, for which energy constitutes a bigger share of their household expenditure, and where the renewables don't really offer much of an option for them. And so it's important to have to focus on these issues and also define the objectives that are actually achievable. It's important to have a coordination between different stakeholders, between agriculture, industry, environment, and forestry, to push forward and to meet the net zero objectives, the energy transition and heating and cooling and transport will be absolutely necessary, because it is these final uses that will make it possible, or in fact represent 75% of the energy consumption worldwide. And however, the efforts, political efforts, have yet so far focused on power, and this applies to the global level. And so it's important to have this holistic approach and to have regulation, tax incentives and regulatory incentives, and to have to be able to integrate all of these policies. And so, for example, in power or renewable energy, where it's important to focus on the elimination of fossil fuels and structuring adapted and to have adapted measures to continue heading in this direction, and also lead to more systemic transformations that involve educational policies that support research and development, also the collaboration between industry and research institutions. It is also important to minimize the cost, the socioeconomic cost of this transition from fossil fuels, and this requires the involvement of different stakeholders, and the transition for workers and the industry needs to be facilitated by opening opportunities and providing new opportunities and providing new professional opportunities. And it's these heating, and we need to consider new options as far as heating and cooling systems that are more sustainable in the future. And this needs to be a systemic approach, which is necessary in the power sector, but also in the socioeconomic sectors that is also predetermined. And here, the main challenges to which the region is faced is energy security. So if we see the current trends, and if they continue, this would definitely aggravate the situation. So the countries of the north will continue, if the countries of the north continue to depend on energy, and so by 2050, the implementation of NDCs, or the NDCs, as I mentioned, for the countries of the south, will lead to self-sufficiency by 2050, following a situation of exporters. And as far as the CO2 emissions,
as for CO2 emissions, it's imperative to reach the goal that was set in 1990 after Kyoto's agreement. So this kind of reduction will allow us to cut half the emissions in 2050 and to have more stability in southern countries. As for the predictions of the International Agency for Renewable Energies, the Mediterranean region has a lot of potential with solar energy. It is also important, the offshore solar panels. This will allow all citizenship to face this energy transition and to protect biodiversity. This is very important in the poorest areas. Also, this will allow citizens to have a better level of literacy. This is something that we need since the beginning. We need to continue carrying out big-scale projects, but we need to set the priorities in order to create infrastructures, to create jobs, and to take into account economic and non-economic factors. Beyond the planning of the developments, we need to take into account the impact risks, also water availability for building these projects. And finally, we need to get a long-term perspective. We need to stop consuming fossil fuels, and we need to get proper conditions to sustain countries, local communities through different economic and tools to develop the talent and to exchange and to share our know-how. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam Lissimri. Yes, what a list of features: green transition, cooperation. Thank you so much for your comments. I'd like to give the floor to Arab Harallah, Executive Director of DSA. You have the floor, Doctor. I think that you have a sound problem with your microphone. Is it working now? Yes, much better. I'm really sorry. Very, very sorry. I'm going to speak in French, though I got my presentation in English. Just a few minutes to start. And later on, you will understand what are my perspectives. I worked a lot for many years in the Mediterranean region. I worked for the Blue Plan. I'm aware about the different scenarios in the Mediterranean and the work that has been made by the European Commission. I also worked in the Sustainable Development for the Mediterranean Commission. I worked in Morocco and Tunisia, as well as in many other countries. I've been always claiming for this sustainable development in the Mediterranean region, but I'm desperate, not only for the Mediterranean region, but also for the whole planet. Mainly, I'm worried about the Mediterranean region because I'm a Mediterranean citizen. I don't see things moving and progressing. The Mediterranean region, it is the most well-prepared region when implementing renewable energies. We must say this crystal clear. The main goal, it is to speak out to governments that they will have to offer the means for those able to implement this sustainable development, such as micro and SMEs, and not only think about huge projects. This is what we need, to count on the SMEs and the citizens.
But you're looking really at the transition, the green transition, and I will insist a lot on the word transition, on where sustainable consumption, production, small and medium enterprises, and green entrepreneurship should be the leading force. Transition needs to follow a certain number of a process, as we know. And if we are currently looking at clean technologies and clean energies, because we want to have a cleaner production, trying to see how the product will be affected by that. And it goes on until closing the loop to the supply chain consumption and the whole system. The problem with green and renewable energy, which is really a driver to sustainability, it's coming on top of a system that is not efficient. So what we are doing in most of the countries, and this is the whole problem of COP and the discussion we're having on climate change, is that we are just putting on top of a system that is not efficient, where inefficiency is the driver. And so before looking at green and renewable energies, we should better first see how we can be really more energy efficient on what we do, and then add the green energy, even though this can be done in parallel. And this requires a proper multi-stakeholder system and a right governance one. And this is completely in a system approach that we are missing completely, because we are missing important part of the system. Now, this has been referred to the issue of decoupling, dematerializing, decarbonizing, detoxifying. All of them, and mainly the three, require energy, renewable energy, and efficiency. But the long-term impact rather than having just the national policy and advocating for that, can only be done with the local actors, because they are the ones who are deeply rooted in the ground and who can ensure sustainability in the long term. They are really the backbone. The problem is that they are out of scope. I have been 35 years with United Nations, and we never talk with the small and medium enterprises. The small and medium enterprises were not in Glasgow, and they do not participate in those last conferences. And we just expect that it trickle down to them, and this cannot happen like that. So there are too many, we don't know how to deal with them, and we don't make the effort to see how to handle that. Still, if you look deeper in that, there are really very good unseen champions. Would it be in Morocco, in Algeria, in Tunisia, in Egypt, everywhere, in Southern Europe, there are unseen champions that we don't consider seriously, and who are the ones who can provide us the right solution that we can really demultiply. And that's what we call the missing middle, which are essential. Without them, we cannot have. There's something missing in the chain. They have to be more visible and provided the right support. The facts are clear. We need to engage properly the private sector. Would it be the big companies? Would it be the small ones? In differentiated responsibility, but where they have to come in. And one thing that we have to induce and push as much as we can is eco-innovation, an innovation that is deeply rooted, if we want to be more resilient and competitive. We are not doing it enough in the Mediterranean region. I'm sorry to say that, even if I left it 15 years ago, I keep on following very closely in the Mediterranean. We are not doing enough on eco-innovation, despite the thousands of cases, but we don't have the critical mass to make an impact now. The market is not following and will not follow. Still, we have to go on voluntary initiative and move further. And the government should provide the right capacity building, the enabling capacity, and the policy framework with the resources, and let the small and medium enterprises and local communities do the right work. So a transition in relation to energy, would it be energy efficiency, renewable energy, green technologies, requires the right knowledge. We do have the knowledge in the Mediterranean. Requires incentives for innovation. We don't have enough of that. We require that we engage in redesigning the product. And every university, every company in the Mediterranean, would it be in Tunisia or Algeria or Morocco, can do it without Spain and without France. There is excellent knowledge available locally to do it. And then we can ask for cooperation with others. So we cannot fix, we cannot really build on something that is ill. Our system is ill. Would it be Mediterranean or globally talking, or when we mention about sustainability, the system is ill. We have not managed to set it up, and we still keep putting on top of it some element. That's why they don't work. So we are setting a lot of goals, but we know very well that each of the actors have common but differentiated responsibilities, and the fights are there. Fights between North and South, between the countries. If the Mediterranean region is not advancing, it's because we have excessive geopolitical focus. We should not forget that. I mean, this is the elephant in the room when we talk about the Mediterranean. Even the Union for the Mediterranean, which has completely another objective on the beginning, is just driven by geopolitics and others. So we have to make sure that this elephant in the room is not neglected, and what we can do behind that to move on further. Let me give you 2-3 examples on kind of innovation that are happening in Asia, in other countries. It's not in Africa, but I have many of them that SEED is doing. I have been following SEED a long time ago, since it was created at Johannesburg in 2002. While I was UNEP, I was following it up, and now they asked me to lead it when I finished with that. We have various initiatives that could be done very easily in any Mediterranean country, where you have just very small startup innovative enterprises that are developing local system for cold rooms using solar powered and innovative built-in thermal system with the local controller, local application that any farmer, any local enterprise well-trained can have with them. And they contribute to climate impact, social impact, and economic impact. Another one in India, which is the same, they have created renewable energy centers to increase awareness of local power, but something that is affordable, that go to local people and doesn't need a high technology. If you look at how we can multiply it, we can have a major impact. And this could be eye-opener for government in order to see how to redirect their element. This one, the last example from Zimbabwe in Harare, where they offer solar energy product to communities lacking access to electricity, centered on affordability, with technology that is at their level, and by recruiting community-based agents so there could be continuity when the work when they step up and leave it to the others. This is my last slide, just putting some question. All the work what we're doing about green and renewable energy, the way we are handling it is just looking at the visible part of the iceberg. We neglect the system that is below, the supply chain, the life cycle. How can we really think beyond the box and really ask ourselves this question? How green and responsible are green and renewable energy? You know very well that there are many questions around that. I personally don't believe that all the renewable and green energy is really green if we look at it from a life cycle perspective and from a system understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Havla. Thank you so much for your kind words. You talked about the commitment of all the stakeholders, but mainly the SMEs. They have a very important role to play. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I do agree with you. We need to offer all the opportunities to SMEs for them to be more engaged and to multiply the effects of this strategy that you share with us. Now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Stefan Liebing, CEO of Conjocta GmbH. He's also the president of Africa Leverin. I'm sorry for my German. I'm sorry. Well, it is the trade association, German-African. It is a very prestigious association gathering active German investors in the African continent. You have the floor.
Thank you, Lubna. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for having me. And greetings from Hamburg this afternoon. I think a lot of important things have been said. So let me just try to add one or two perspectives from my view as an investor, project developer, and also running a business association that tries to form a bridge between Germany or Northern Europe and Africa, and to promote additional investment, especially, of course, in the sector of green energy and efficient technologies. I think it's a very timely thing to discuss green energy today, but you've also picked the right region. And there's a deeper reason behind that. I'm deeply convinced that the Mediterranean is going to play the critical role in making the story about greening and decarbonizing societies and economies a success. And that is because the Mediterranean is going to be the bridge between huge demand centers in Northern Europe and the places on the African continent where we have the opportunity to generate that green energy and transport it to Europe. And the countries of the Mediterranean, on both sides of the Mediterranean Sea, they have a special role because they have both of these features together. They are demand centers, they have increasing and growing industries, but at the same time, they're also going to play an important role with pilot projects and with the first projects mainly in hydrogen, I guess, that we are going to see. We are all aware that the European Union is planning their Fit for 55 program. Germany has adopted a law that would expect climate neutrality by 2045, so in just 25 years. And still, if we look at this ambitious target and know at the same time that this country imports 2/3 of its energy needs today, and all of these imports are in fossil form, it's lignite, it's oil and gas, 2/3 of the need. So if we want to replace that within 25 years, there's no way of us just doing it by adding some green generation capacity in country. It's going to require huge imports of green energy, mainly in the form of hydrogen and derivative products. Now, on the other hand, we have the African continent that, as everybody knows, has got huge resources of solar, wind, and also hydro energy. And I guess the joint challenge that we need to manage and that we need to deliver on is to use that and decarbonize industrialized countries. And actually that is happening as we speak. I think we see the development of a new set of countries that can form something that will replace green energy around the world. And we see pilot projects. I think Morocco has been mentioned. We see things in Egypt and Tunisia. We see projects in Nigeria, Mauritania, in Angola, Namibia, and South Africa. Now, it's not new technology, that's the good news, but it's of course a very different scale of applying that technology that is proven and that we have seen before. At the moment, we are talking about hydrogen projects of maybe 10 or 20 megawatts, and what we need is 100,000 or even more megawatts of that capacity, mainly on the African continent. And that is, as I said, why I believe the Mediterranean can form the bridge between these two parts, the supply center and the demand center in the north. The government of Namibia, the president himself has announced that the results of the first tender in Glasgow just a few days ago for a 2.5 gigawatts renewable energy project that is destined for export to Europe, a hydrogen project. And we are very proud that part of the winning consortium is also a German player. So all of this is happening as we speak, and we might well see that what now flows to the Middle East or to Russia as petrodollars might be diverted within a few years to a set of new countries. And I think for these countries, the challenge now is not to be late and to develop these projects as soon as possible. I think there is three main challenges that come with this, this important and big task. Number one is we need to make sure that we do not just generate energy for export, but we need to make sure that local societies can benefit from that development and that some of the electricity will stay there. The good news is in many cases before, renewable energy projects in Africa in the end didn't materialize because of constraints in financing. Because we didn't have strong creditworthy off-takers, because international banks found it difficult to take that off-take risk or failure of payment risk. And that is why many projects that otherwise would have made a lot of sense, local projects, did not materialize in the end. Now that is different because if we have an export component, bankability will come in much easier as soon as there's strong international off-takers for some of the product, so that the second stream of the product can stay and can be used locally. So I'm quite optimistic that this is going to drive a new phase of the energy transition around the world. The second point is if we want to move fast, we need a structure that takes project development risk at early stages. As we have seen in all sort of local electrification projects, there is a lack of funding for early stage high risk developments, and we need to make sure that after we've seen so many renewable energy IPP developers coming up, we need now a set of hydrogen project developers and that might require some government support in one way or another. And the third aspect I'd like to mention is to briefly introduce a new structure that the German government has created just recently, which is called H2 Global. And that's a government-funded and backed offtake entity for green energy product imports. So this entity is going to give away and award 10 years procurement contracts with a German government guarantee and a fixed price today to any investors that want to invest in green energy and hydrogen projects on the African continent. And that's going to accelerate bankability of these projects and therefore make them a lot more realistic in this starting phase of a new market developing. So with these three aspects, I think we have quite a few matters to discuss, and I very much look forward to an exchange after, I think, one more speaker that is going to come. Thanks, Lubna.
Merci, Dr. Stéphane. Donc,
thank you so much, Dr. Stefan. When you talk about financing, I think about the discussion that I had previously with Michel Liwawi. I think that you are going to talk. Mr. Ami, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lubna. I will just compliment my distinguished panelists, mainly speaking from a sustainability perspective, focusing on challenges, enablers, and even further opportunities than the ones that top the list usually. From a sustainability perspective, we need to make sure that the energy transition is inclusive for everyone. And this has actually been a key topic of discussion in COP26. The divide between the developed countries and the developing countries that actually contribute so much less emissions per capita puts a lot of questions. What is needed to incentivize the developing countries to adopt a costly and a fast-tracked transition to clean, green, renewable energy? What about the social costs? The social costs in terms of both replacing and retransitioning, re-equipping the existing workforce in hydrocarbon exporting nations. Maybe this is not the case in Morocco, but in Tunisia, in Algeria, in Egypt, this is the case. These are hydrocarbon exporting nations. And as the European Union Climate Commissioner mentioned, natural gas at least is going to stay with us for a while. So how to make sure that there is more cooperation in, first of all, capitalizing on the technologies that exist within the hydrocarbons industry in renewable energy. We have CCUS, we have geothermal. Geothermal is hugely overlooked. Geothermal energy utilizes a lot of the existing oil and gas technology in terms of drilling, completions, even the geological and geophysical aspects, the studies, the facilities. So we have areas that we are very well equipped in North Africa to tackle and yet meet the renewables targets that we aspire to achieve. Tunisia has a very ambitious renewables target, 30% in 2030. Currently, the progress has been paused for a while due to macro problems. How's the European partners supporting this? In Algeria is the only CCUS plant in operation in Ain Salah. Why not replicate this operational CCUS plant across North African oil and gas fields? I'm especially talking about gas fields. The field is operated by BP. So already there is a European party that can do the knowledge transfer. In terms of financing, this is a very critical part. As everyone knows, the challenge has been to put in place the $100 billion per annum in climate financing. The highest figure ever reached, as per the statistics shown in COP26, is not more than 70 something billion dollars. So if it's 78, 79. And that was the peak. That was unsustained. How do we make sure that we bring in additional stakeholders into financing this gap? We have philanthropists, we have NGOs, we have non-state players that are very active in Europe, in North America, in the developed world, that are non-existent in Africa. We need to bring these and tell them, since we are now establishing a win-win situation where Africa will contribute to supplying energy to Europe and contribute to the energy security of Europe, we need you to be there. We need you to be here in Africa as well. This will greatly help bridge the gap. In terms of the nature of financing, again, the breakdowns and the statistics that were shown in COP26 show that most of the finance, 25%, more than 25%, is in the form of loans. So as a low emitter per capita country, I find it hard to accept the idea that I'm giving a loan to contribute to other persons or other entities' priorities. Again, it's a global climate. We are speaking in the Mediterranean Forum, so we share at least the Mediterranean between Europe and Africa. But again, the incentives would be much higher if we consider increasing, for example, the equity portion of financing, which currently stands at below 3% of bilateral and multilateral financing. This is a very small number compared to what it should be. 3% in equity holdings for climate financing. This is a very low number. Again, credit guarantees. Dr. Stefan just spoke before me about creative financial instruments and financing. Credit guarantees, they are a huge enabler for SMEs and private sector to embark on the energy transition. If I am going to a small business owner or an SME business owner and telling them they have to spend several millions of dollars to increase their energy efficiency, which is, again, a low-hanging fruit that is very much underrated and de-emphasized. The energy losses in the developing countries are huge. I've lived in Europe and I've lived in different developing countries, and you could see the energy inefficiency so high in developing countries. So this is a low-hanging fruit. This is something that we can start working on from today. It doesn't involve a massive infrastructure or anything. It just needs the proper mentality, as Dr. Hubala said, redesigning the system, energy cogeneration, heating and cooling. In our part of the world, it's mainly heating. So how much energy is dissipated and lost actually because of low building standards? We need to, again, reassess the certification standardization aspect. Who is financing this? Our European partners can help in both financing and the know-how. The know-how aspect is critically important, but again, the intention is there, the ambition is there, and luckily we have passed, as COP26 witnessed, we have passed the idea of convincing people all over the world that climate change is a reality. We have to act upon it. For example, I work in the Arab Petroleum Exporting Corporation, Arab Petroleum Investments Corporation, which is part of the OAPEC, the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Nations, and we have recently adopted an ESG framework. We are now starting to assess the investments that we enter into from an environmental, social, and governance aspect. One might think that, okay, financial institutions already had the government aspect in place, but the environmental and the social ones, they were not really given the emphasis that they should be. So you could see companies and even nations, top petroleum exporting nations, committing to net zero targets. In my humble perception, net zero target is nothing if you don't have the KPIs needed to measure this on a short and medium term. Otherwise, it's something very visionary, very much futuristic. It doesn't allow you to assess where you're going and to rectify and correct if needed, and it will be needed. It will be needed. Again, something like CSR, corporate responsibility, it needs to take a different turn. We need to start working on enabling the SMEs to join the party. It's very hard for an SME that has a moderate or a modest turnover to invest in energy efficiency or in renewables that are initially more costly to adopt. So where are the incentives? Where are the tax incentives? These are all things that we need to consider. And I believe the Mediterranean Partnership is a great medium to embark on these improvements and enablers. Considering also the underrated and the overlooked technologies like geothermal, I think geothermal should be put into huge perspective, especially in countries that already have an oil and gas, a strong oil and gas sector. We're talking about Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, Egypt. Again, the social component should not be lost in perspective. As my fellow panelists were saying, we need to make sure that it's a win-win for everyone, not only for export-oriented projects or export-oriented mentality. We need to make sure that it's inclusive, because this is how it becomes sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nabi. Thank you so much for your great words. Thank you so much to all the participants. In order to conclude, I do believe that I could gather different common points in all the contributions. SMEs, the role of SMEs. On the other hand, we need to take into account integration as well as the implication of all the stakeholders and the financial tools. Always when we talk about green energy, renewable energy, we listen about thousands and millions and billions of euros. However, when we talk about SMEs, things change a lot. How is it possible? How can we change this scale and this scope? So, in conclusion, in order to invest in green and renewable energy, they are very big investments, so there is no room for SMEs. How can we change this perspective? After your different contributions and explanations, you all agree that we need to make SMEs to get involved in this transformation, as well as to include local stakeholders and actors, right? We are not only looking for this energy transition, we are not only looking for the environment improvement, we are also looking for job creation, to have a better industry in all our countries. We are looking for a global economic development and everything that goes together, social, environmental, all the improvements that are needed. I'd like to give the floor to each and every one of you to think together. How can we change the pattern and to involve SMEs in this new dynamics? I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Arab. You have the floor. Thank you. Well, listen, You underscored two important points. The financial instruments. Truly speaking, when we talk about huge projects, banks, they do not know how to deal with investors. I know that there are many things that need to be improved. I was involved in a huge study and a survey in Asia with the European Bank together with the Asian Investment Bank in order to know how to proceed to offer financial mechanisms and instruments to allow SMEs to have access to funds. The Asian Bank is working in this regard. So we have huge investments that should be made by the state when we talk about the renewable energy in Morocco or in Tunisia, as well as in Egypt. When we talk about the exports, between brackets, we need to have a much secure system, and we need to offer new access to local population. If we don't include local population, we will never be successful. Sometimes there are no infrastructures in those countries, so we need to improve the infrastructures. This is the direct responsibility of the country. The second idea, as for the SMEs question, there are several mechanisms that have been developed slowly that they have the so-called ticket, right? And it's just a first step. We are gradually improving. The AFD is working on that, so the financial mechanisms already exist. But I do really believe that our country home-based banks, they should understand this mechanism to improve the funds that are allocated to SMEs. We do have several strategies with the building sector in our country. I know that the Mediterranean countries, they are making huge efforts through the Green Building Council. We have these kind of certificates and labels that only cover 1% of our buildings in our countries. And the rest of buildings, they are not efficient buildings, not smart buildings. They will create a huge problem in the next 50 years. So it's going to be very complicated, right? So the long fruit is in the building. That's the idea. We need to improve building construction. Well, maybe with the exception of a big office building, there are no other examples. So we must take seriously the building sector. On the other hand, the big words, the huge investments, and the question with the SMEs. Well, let me answer to that. Well, we need big projects, but we need a value chain. We always have implications, and we need to be aware about the implications with the SMEs. We need also to guarantee at a local level to SMEs that they will have some elements for them to get a better development. So if we are able to create a startup system that will be institutionalized through the government support and through international support, we'll be able to make incredible things without including huge corporations, right? So that's the strategy to me. There are many initiatives that have been created in Asia and in Africa. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Harab. Now, when we talk about African initiatives, I'd like to give the floor to Ali Zirali. Please let us know, what do you think about that? What would be the strategy? What would be the dynamics, right? As Mazen has created, how this has an impact in the industry development in Africa. Mr. Ali, you have the floor. Bien, well, let me tell you something from my side. After Dr. Arab's words, let me offer you a more holistic perspective. There are two main objectives and goals that are very important, and they are flagship objectives. We realize that in Africa, there is less than 3% that are transformed. Why? The explanation is very simple. First of all, we have less know-how in Africa. We have less logistics infrastructures and less legislation. But the most important thing is that there is a lack of a competitive market of the energy. Globally, in Africa, well, we only pay 30 cents by gigawatt, and in Europe, we pay more than that. So it's easier to export. The added value, it's in the developed countries, and then we import the finished products that will be sold in Africa. We are big consumers of everything, but we are not big producers. So when we talk about fossil fuels energy, in the past, we didn't have any site to treat. The oil was exported and it was imported when refined. So this is just a reality, because I want to underline and to offer you a new perspective about the opportunities that renewables will play. When we talk about renewables in Africa, we cannot export sun and wind and to import back again. So it has to be made and produced on site. In the African countries, when talking about renewables, we will be able to produce green molecules, green energy, at a very low cost, which is a prerequisite to place in the continent green energy such as steel, aluminium, and many other industries. So the raw materials are in Africa, the energy is in Africa. We need to seize the moment and the opportunity to improve the value chain and the transformation and manufacturing chain in Africa and to place it in the continent. This will be a great opportunity, a real opportunity. So everything is aligned. All the planets are in harmony. And we will have loads of manufacturers that will come to Africa. And this will be very positive for the continent. When we take this green molecule, the price of these green molecules, mainly in Morocco, will be around $2 per kilo. When we project and we export in a developed country, it rises to $6–7. So 2/3 are related to production and logistics. This is not the case for fossil fuels and energy, because gas and oil, they have a strict strategy to export. When we talk about this kind of energy such as ethanol and green molecules, the interesting thing is it to reduce the amount of costs when dealing with the logistics processes. So this will mean that for the green energy producers, they will have a great opportunity when we'll be on site. Therefore, we all win. And we need the support from the governments to get all the needed infrastructures and to offer to the market the know-how and the expertise to attract everything. Well, we need also other subsidiary elements that will be available for producers for them to have incentives and to produce on site. Personally, I think that we are ready to improve the energy exchange and trade between Europe and Africa. We can see the same processes in Asia, America, and many other places. So there are great opportunities for those investors that will be multinational and continental investors with the production of a local industry aiming at satisfying all these ODGs. So we need these raw materials, and the country should be able to transform to add the value that is needed together with the developed countries and to reach this co-development strategy that is really needed in our continent. Thank you so much. That's the idea, how to create wealth and global development, whether it's in the Mediterranean or in the African country with this win-win partnership. Dr. Navi Sharadi, what do you think about that? Listen, only great things ahead. In order to complete the previous words and mainly Mr. Hara's presentation, yes, we do ignore the SMEs. We always think big. When we talk about figures, we talk about billions and billions and hundreds of millions for every energy project. But there is something vital. Sun, it's everywhere. And we need to put it in a single place. Why not to develop small projects? Through the connection of small projects, we'll be offering the opportunity to new enterprises that will be created on site. They will be able to develop know-how, also the skills. And after that, they will be developing at a larger scale and to be the competitors of the huge corporations. We cannot think anymore about the sun energy. Maybe there are other countries, of course, that are making their best. Maybe my country is creating, such as Morocco, creating huge infrastructures that are amazing, are great, are neat, impeccable. But beyond that, we were not able to develop the literacy, the know-how, the training for local enterprises to be part of the solar energy project that was created in 2009 in my country. So there were different solar sites that needed 2,000 employees for the construction. But after the construction, what do we have? Only 20 people working in the site for the maintenance of the panels. If we had thought differently, if we had been able to develop small projects together with huge projects, we will be offering the possibility to small companies that were created to develop these huge projects to be still alive. One of the examples that I personally experienced, it is the Tunisian case. Tunisia, they made something formidable, amazing. Well, they had a project in 2010. They had a huge project. There were small enterprises that were dead. The first goal that they did, they developed Program A and Program B. Inside Program A, we had the huge projects and the international corporations and how they could apply and to answer. And as for the small projects, they were the local actors that had to be involved. Well, both strategies were amazing to make the biggest ones and the smallest ones to be in the process of solar energy creation. Well, if I give the example of Saudi Arabia, they had huge programs. They had a project of 300 megawatts. Our society was not able to give an answer to this project. So we had to develop other projects elsewhere. Once they reached to their goal, they created an A program and a B program. This allowed us also to be there and to be a candidate and to win the project. So we can involve the SMEs, but we need to think differently from a local perspective through small projects, through, I'm not talking about China, of course, they developed a huge industry. They went beyond the market. They don't have enough market, and suddenly they develop the market, right? So this is what we are witnessing when we talk about energy production, when we talk about goods, services, products. I'm always speaking on behalf of the industry sector, right? So I think that later on, we'll be able to develop, how can I say, we'll be able to help and to give support to all the corporations that will get more skills, more know-how, and to be at the international level. The market, it's global, it's not local. I'm sure that Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, they will be saturated very quickly, such as in the case of Jordan. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Suradi. I think that we still have some minutes. I'd like to give the word to Dr. Liebing, Stefan Liebing. Maybe you could talk about the financial instruments to engage these SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, I believe we need two accomplishments to get more SMEs involved. One is, first of all, we need to point them to the opportunities. Not all of them are aware of developments and of investment opportunities in the region. So I believe in the strength of success stories. We need to create a few success stories, and we need governments to focus on these and making them a success so that SMEs see what is possible and they could come to repeat. On the financial instruments, as I said before in my first intervention, I think these are critical to make SMEs move. Although one has to say there is no shortage for money for green energy projects in the region, there is a shortage of bankable projects. So we need to make sure, number one, projects get developed to a stage that they can take investment decision. That is the high risk phase when there's a high likelihood of projects failing, and therefore many SMEs being concerned of investing a lot of money during that phase. So we need support for that. And the second aspect is, as soon as projects are ready for investment, of course, we need to look at how we can increase bankability, because all of these SMEs depend on bank financing, depend on loans, and they are only going to get these if there's the right framework of guarantees, bank guarantees, investment guarantees, and available. And I think that is where governments need to come in to provide certain financial instruments so that projects become bankable, it's easier for them to be developed, and SMEs abroad actually notice what's going to happen by seeing about success stories in the media.
Merci à vous, docteur. Je donne la parole à
So much, Doctor. I'd like to give the floor to Madam Hashar Hamlishi. Yes, how to fight for SMEs. Yes, it is needed to fight for SMEs. And I do agree with the previous speakers. There are two aspects. We have the SMEs that for sure will need to be included in the value chain, to be more efficient, and they also need support from the big corporations, the governments, in order to create a much more dynamic ecosystem. There is another aspect that has to do with the decarbonization of the SMEs. We want them to be included in the world efforts, local efforts for this energy transformation, to reach this energy transition we're all talking about here. Therefore, SMEs, they do really need to strengthen their level of resilience. And how can we strengthen their resilience? I would say that we will need different systems. I think that we have the small corporations, the big corporations. Mainly, I do believe that the building sector has to make an effort. Not all the countries, but we have different systems such as LEEDs, different certifications, and all different labels that regulate the green buildings. And there is another aspect that has to do with the process multiplication. This is tougher. This is more difficult for SMEs. And how to make things evolve, to have more sustainable businesses, and to create this circular economy to have a circular business model. This would be a big challenge for the building industry. There are many other examples that will be included that will offer some support. What could be a great support? I'm thinking about Morocco with the new decarbonization Moroccan programs aiming at SMEs, mainly at SMEs, that count with some diversification instruments through the allocation of credits and funds, and also training sessions for the SMEs. And also, we must talk about the motivational aspect that has to do with the cooperation, the collaboration with the partners. This peer collaboration is vital. I know that we don't have time, but I'd like to congratulate the Chamber of Commerce of Industry of the region Hasima, chaired also by the Renewable Energy Commission at the ASCAME. They showed an initiative to have an alliance of chambers of commerce for the climate transition. This alliance is aiming at SMEs, and this spotlight sometimes is not very favorable. Sometimes these SMEs, they fell outside of the energy transition. This is important, motivation and cooperation amongst us. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and thank you so much for the opportunity and this amazing session that we had today. Thank you very much. Mr. Rami, if you want to close the session.
Thank you for giving me the honor. I will just compliment with a few notes. I mean, despite the huge role that SMEs will play, yet government enablers make up the most rapid and effective change. The cases of Morocco, of Egypt, are demonstration to this. Morocco now has become, correct me if I'm wrong, the Moroccan panelists, my fellow panelists, has become the largest exporter of automobiles in Africa. This has been a government policy for decades, with a specific target that Morocco should become the largest exporter of automobiles and move, as Mr. Zilwari was saying, move the automobile business and manufacturing business specifically to Morocco from Europe. And they have succeeded. This is excellent. Dr. Shiradi, who I had the pleasure to participate in several conferences with him, has been calling for the localization of solar panel industries in the region. And this will have a huge effect, a huge trickle-down effect from all aspects: economical, social, creating jobs, GDP contribution, and also energy security. We have an upcoming paper that we are publishing from Apicorp Energy Research about energy storage. It's another lucrative business that is necessary to when we speak about interregional energy exchange and trading. We have to have an energy storage infrastructure that is able to cater for the gigawatts or the hundreds of megawatts that are going that will be going from Africa to Europe. So nobody can undermine the role of the government and the public sector as enablers. Speaking about energy efficiency, the government can and should start putting and designing regulations for new buildings. Okay, nobody can demolish the millions of buildings that exist because they do not comply with environmental standards, but let's start by putting the rules now for new buildings that include environmental standards, just like the ones that we dream of, the ones that contribute with a minimal effect to the environment and energy losses. The investments in ICT and infrastructure in terms of logistics, transportation, also contribute to energy efficiency and decarbonization. You had the worst traffic jams in Cairo before. How many cars, buses, trucks kept standing for hours? Imagine the amount of GHG emissions and their effect even on public health. Now they are gone. The investment in infrastructure has been paying off. The investments in ICT, as I was saying, application of virtual offices, virtual work, remote work, saves thousands of commuters on a daily basis. This has a trickle-down effect on refined products, refined petrochemical products consumption, fuel. So there are lots of things that can be done.
Je dois de clôturer, mettre fin à cette session.
I am really sorry. We have to close this session. Thank you so much for your amazing answers, for your great contribution. Thank you for offering us all your fruitful comments. I do hope that we'll meet you again in the next session, Inch'Allah, en direct à Barcelone, avec des initiatives concrètes, very specific initiatives. Thank you so much. Merci.